Ready? You all set? Okay, it being 6:30, I'll call to order the meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. Today is Monday, January 14th, 2019. It's 6:30 p.m. We're at the Oregon High School Innovation Center. Katie, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Feeney? Ms. Oderico?
Here.
Ms. Flanagan?
Here.
Mr. Pankratz?
Present.
Mr. Kraus? Mr. LeBrun?
Here.
Mr. Zock?
Present. Board has a quorum. I have proof that the meeting has been appropriately noticed under Wisconsin Open Meetings Law, and I have that proof with Ms. Heitz, and if anyone wants to examine that, it would be with her. Our agenda tonight includes our standard items A, B, and C. Action items, we're going to review briefly, I think, WASB resolutions, and then we have a policy on medication from Policy Committee, and then a couple informational items. So we have a short agenda tonight, and then the board will be moving into closed session at the end of our open session, and the board would not return to open session after that. I would need a motion to approve the agenda as posted.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We have an agenda. Item A under our revised agenda is consent calendar. Is there any item that any member wishes to have removed? I just saw Courtney's flashing red light, so that didn't mean anything other than your mic works, right? Good. Okay, then I would need a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
I would note that we have a number of donations tonight. We have the donation of a string bass to the orchestra program from Chris Tower. Donation in the amount of $500 from Elizabeth Kiefer for the Muffy Kiefer Scholarship. Abbott Charitable Foundation is donating $4,000 for the Netherwood Knoll Playground Fund. The Oregon Rotary Foundation is donating $6,100 for Oregon Rotary Scholarships. The Oregon Area Educational Foundation is donating $250 for the OHS DECA Conference. Oregon Community Bank is donating $5,000 for the Oregon High School Scoreboard. Edward Ferguson is donating $2,000 for Oregon Middle School band activity, and that's an unrestricted donation. Dirty Ducks Cleaning is donating $5,000 for Oregon High School Scoreboard. Brothers HVAC, $800 for the splash pad. Emily Stavness, $200 for the splash pad. Robert Steinberg and Cynthia Mealy, $150 for the Brooklyn Birthday Cart and BKA Helping Families. The Friends of the Orchestra, slightly over $300 for buses for a field trip. And Brad and Kathy Cooksey, $500 for student support. Don't mind reading all of those, and I would continue at meetings to read a lengthy list of that, and that's fantastic. We thank all those folks for their donations to the Oregon School District for making us a better district. I don't think we have any contracts in there, so I think we can just do this by voice vote. All of those in favor of the items on the consent calendar signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. Communication from the public. Board Policy 18004 establishes the opportunity for the public to address the board. Katie, anybody registered with you? I know we have someone in the audience who's running for election and would like to introduce herself. Anna Bijak, who there are 2 seats open, and Anna's filed for them. And Anna, take a seat. That's our guest spot, and that's a microphone. There should be a microphone, button on the microphone right at the top there.
Is this on?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Steve, for giving me the opportunity to approach the board and introduce myself. My name is Anna Bijak, and I have decided to run for school board for this upcoming election, and I'm really excited about that potential. I will say I have always appreciated education to the point where my senior year of high school, we could choose, actually maybe my junior year, we could choose any topic we wanted to write a photojournal paper about. And as a high school student, I chose the importance of school in my life. So I'll say that this has been something that I've loved from the very beginning. My first exposure to this district would have been in 2000, what year was it? 2009 or 10, when my children started kindergarten at Brooklyn Elementary, and maybe it was 2012. Yes, 2012. And at that time, I started attending the PTO meetings and got very involved with the PTO. Became president for 3 years and really enjoyed working very closely with the leadership team at that school, learning more about the needs within the school and the district as a whole, and really was very inspired by having that opportunity to volunteer within the school and get to know the families and the people who rely so heavily on the value of the education this district brings to their children. I was also invited to attend the 2015 Visioning Conference, and that was my first exposure to really a full understanding of the power of the leadership within this district, the direction this district is moving in, and it was very enlightening for me to the point where I was like, wow, I want to be a bigger part of this. I want to take a more active role in helping to create and continue to move this district in a direction that feels like it's really wonderful. And so I'm really excited about the potential and looking forward to getting to know many of you better and work towards making the district as awesome as it is today and even more as we continue to grow.
Thank you. You have 2 children in the district?
Yes, I do. Yep.
What grade are they in now?
I have twins who are 6th graders at Rome Corners. So
Terrific. We've given Anna the magic secret public password or the domain site to get the board meeting packets that the public can get. So she knows to get those, and I think has expressed an intent of attending our board meeting, so she ramps up fully for April. Thanks.
yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to address the board at this time? Okay, I don't see anyone. Informational items, OEA report. I don't see anyone here. We talked with the leadership on last Thursday, and we said we're going to have a light schedule, so we said if you didn't want to come, that would be okay, and they said they welcomed that because they're in the middle of exam time too. And speaking of exam time, I really wasn't expecting you to be here tonight. How'd it go today?
Good.
Anything to report? You're on. Go.
Just getting ready for exams. They start on Wednesday. But I already took my AP biology exam, and that was the one that I was most worried for. So I feel pretty good regarding finals. But yeah, just getting ready for them. And then semester 2. And also, Beckon Pearson, she is the other president of student council. So starting second semester, she'll be coming instead of me. So like next meeting, I may just come with her to like introduce her and stuff, if that sounds okay.
Perfectly fine.
Perfect.
Great. Thanks. Got to go back on. Takes us to action items. Number 1 is WASB resolutions. If you recall, Mr. LeBrun just eagerly volunteered to be the our representative at the delegate assembly at the WASB convention. We mock that somewhat, but it's really an important function of our Association of School Boards, where they develop resolutions and policy statements that guides them not only in the long term but in the short term for legislative action. So our default has generally been to follow the WASB recommendations, and the board that looks at the resolutions and makes recommendations to those, unless we have any particular resolution that we want to take a different stance. And so every board member should have received electronically or otherwise a copy of the resolutions that will be considered at the delegate assembly. And Tim, I think the instruction is that you vote, the default is to vote in favor of the WASB recommendation unless you hear otherwise. So the floor is open. Is there any particular resolution that any board member thinks we ought to take a stance different than WASB recommends? Tim.
I just want to note that there are 33 different resolutions, and many of the resolutions bring up topics across the state that we aren't having to wrestle with. We have been very fortunate. We have, for instance, an increasing population of students, where many other districts, particularly rural districts, have a decreasing and quickly decreasing. And so it talks about using different running averages, the most favorable running average or last year's population, to determine lots of different funding mechanisms. And so that's just one. Another popular topic is around school vouchers, and where places like Milwaukee is struggling with the changes that school vouchers are creating in their district. And so again, if I looked across the 33 that we are looking at here today, probably half of them are issues that this district is not having to face, but nevertheless very important issues for rural communities, particularly those losing student population, and then very densely populated districts who are facing, for lack of a better term, competition in the education business.
Does anybody have any resolution that they want to discuss with respect to providing direction to Tim other than the WASB recommendation? Barb?
I guess I'd like a little discussion about on page 7, the resolution. WASB supports legislation to change state statutes that set forth the methods for changing the number of board members and the geographic apportionment, to allow electors at the annual meeting to amend proposals submitted by petition that would change the number of board members or establish or amend a plan of apportionment. And I guess the thing that I just want to talk about is my concern that whatever changes could be coming up at an annual meeting, as we know, annual meetings usually are not very well attended, at least in this school district. And I guess I have a concern that changes would be made at the annual meeting without notice to the public.
I am on the understanding that there were 33 resolutions submitted to a committee that recommends whether they go for discussion to the delegate assembly, and you're actually only going to be considering 15.
Yes.
And the
Sorry.
one that you're talking about, Barb, I think was turned down
Yes.
by the committee.
Thank you.
So,
Oh,
so they're only
okay.
going to be discussing and voting on 15.
Yeah, they've consolidated some of them, of the 33, and they set aside some of them that are not necessarily all-encompassing all districts. That one
Okay.
was more specifically identified for a specific district that is experiencing a relatively unique situation.
Okay, so even though WASB supports it, it's being set aside.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, Courtney.
Yeah, if you had
Well, there were-
if you had 33 resolutions to discuss, you would be there for a week. It takes a long time.
Yeah, there were two. That was from Holy Hills. There's a consolidation of school districts into the Holy Hills School District, and one was turned down. There's a second one that just said the committee recommended that the resolution move forward to the assembly with modifications to allow any school board, not solely newly consolidated boards, to reduce the number by 2 members in a single step. That's different than the one you were looking at. Yeah. So Barb, I think the one you were looking at and the one that when I was reading it concerned me too, that I don't think's coming to the delegate assembly. So, okay. Yeah. Thanks. But that is a relevant point, Barb, because we'll probably have a petition along those lines next annual meeting. Any other resolutions that are going to go before the assembly that anyone wants to discuss? Seeing none, you have your direction. Okay. Let's move on to policy 558, medication. That's coming from policy. And Krista, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Steve. So you have in front of you a draft of policy 558, which is medication. This one specifically concerns CBD, which if you've been paying attention to the antique store downtown, hair salons, gas stations, you'll know that CBD is growing in popularity in terms of being readily available. So this was brought to the policy committee to get in front of it for the school district because we've had some requests for students to use CBD. It's also being used as an anti-anxiety or to help with mental health issues too, so we thought it would be relevant to discuss. And so what is before you is the addition of 558.02, which talks about kind of setting a high standard for students only to be able to use CBD in school. And so you have one draft, and then Steve made some really good changes, which is the one that you see that has some additions and crossouts in that. So I'll just kind of walk through the bullet points briefly, and Gina can weigh in too if I miss something. But the first one, or overall, it just says school employees may not possess, use, or administer products containing CBD. So this on school property or at school-related functions. So this is only to help with student administration of CBD. And so you'll see the 5 bullet points talk about that it has to be a written certification from a physician licensed in the state of Wisconsin. It must state that the student is required to consume CBD during the school day or at a school-related function. There must be written permission from the parent that the student is able to administer that themselves, that it will be kept locked and administered in the school office where other medications are kept and stored, and that the parent guardian provides the district with product information that definitely states that CBD does not contain any THC. So our recommendation from the policy committee is to approve this amendment to policy 558 medication. So
Yeah,
there you have it.
I had one question in the first paragraph, and I didn't edit that, but it's the last sentence says a student may only possess or use products while on school property. The last bullet, or the second to last bullet point, says that the CBD is going to be locked and administered in the school office. So would we really be having a student possess CBD in that first paragraph? Shouldn't that really read a student may only use products while on school property?
Well, I think the last sentence, it says under the following conditions.
Yeah.
And so that qualifies that
Okay.
statement. And so they will have it in their possession when they're in the school office because staff will not be administering it.
Got it.
But if that's confusing, we can certainly change that.
That makes a lot of sense. So, and is school-related functions broad enough to cover, or do we even need that if we have,
Right,
if it's gonna be in the school office?
Well, I think that would be a discussion point when we talked about at policy, just to back up a little bit, that there are districts that are wrestling with this question because as CBD becomes more popular, just for your knowledge that it's an interesting hybrid of laws put together, but essentially in Wisconsin, because Wisconsin participates in a hemp program, that stores are able to sell CBD oil legally, but people cannot possess it unless they have a letter from their physician stating that they're able to possess it. And the reason for that is CBD can contain up to 0.3% of THC. Now, they do offer products that they say are THC free. And so we're really trying to balance having this on school property and having parents be able to use it as a tool for their children. So we really try to do it narrow. And the reason that we talked about school property is that because we have places in our school where we do lock our prescription medications. So the reason I bring that up is because if you want to at school related functions, that would be okay. It's just that I think we'd need to amend it to say it would be kept in the school office or other locations because, for example, when you take a field trip, we do have staff that take medication with them, but obviously if you're on a field trip, you can't keep it locked in the office. So I think that if you want to have it at school-related functions, that we would just need to amend the 4th bullet point. If you prefer not to have it at school-related functions that aren't on our property, then we wouldn't need that amendment. So I think they go together.
And if we didn't amend it to include school-related functions, a student could have CBD on their person and use it if that school-related function is not on school property.
As long as it didn't contain THC.
Correct.
You're saying if we amended it.
If we did not amend it, if it stayed that as it's coming forth from policy that they can only possess it on school property subject to these conditions. If you're not on school property, but it's a school-related function, let's say I'm on an athletic or other co-curricular team and I'm on a school bus or somewhere else, I could have CDB and utilize it then if it didn't contain THC.
But then you would still be you'd still have to have the physician letter and all of the other criteria, at least from a state law standpoint. So if you didn't have those things, you'd be in violation of other board policy.
Well, one of the things we also talked about is keeping this consistent with other medication, and those have to be administered in the office. Kids cannot take medication out of the office and then take it to the lunchroom and have it with their lunch. And so I would hesitate to do that with this because that's counter to our other policy, if I'm saying that correctly, that one of the things we did discuss at policy is that this has to be consistent with how we do other medications.
Correct.
Yep, and I get that, but if we don't include school-related functions with CBD, that allows a student to use it and possess it if they're on a school-related activity that's not on school property.
As long as they meet the state law requirement that they'd have a physician letter and
Right.
it was THC free to comply
Right.
with board policy. So, or you could amend it tonight to say you don't allow it as school-related functions. So I think a policy, what we talked about is keeping it very narrow to just the school date because parents have asked for it in terms of helping students be able to learn effectively.
So would it be better in your view to take out the or at school-related functions references and just leave it as it was?
I would say go that path or say that it would be stored in other locations where we keep prescription medication. And I would look to the principals. I know each school has a process on field trips of how you bring prescription medication for the kids who need it. I will. Is it okay if I ask Jason Zerwick to
Sure.
explain what he does? We'll go with the middle. Field trips and medication.
We have packs that are put together by our health office and assigned to staff members to administer at certain points.
So if we would do that, would amend that fourth bullet point is kept locked and administered in the school office where prescription medications are stored or administered. It'd be in the school office or other locations?
That would be fine, since I think each school is going to have a different process.
Chris, does that raise issues in terms of consistency with you?
should we say, or other locations consistent with how prescription medications are distributed or administered or something like that? Because I don't think we want to open this up to, I think it should be consistent with how we do other medications. So we should qualify that.
So it could read, in the school office or other locations consistent with where prescription medications are stored and administered?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Gina, does that cause any problems with you legally?
That would be fine.
Krista's chair, are you okay with that?
I am.
Okay. Those were the only questions I had. Barb?
Sorry.
At the first sentence about school employees may not possess, use, or use for themselves. Is this consistent with our policy on how employees use other medications?
So it isn't in terms of how we use and store medication. We don't store medications for employees. And so really what our thinking behind it is that there is a small risk that because CBD isn't regulated, that the federal government has taken the stance that if there is THC, that you could be in violation of Title I and jeopardize your Title I funding, because in order to receive Title I funding, you have to ensure a drug-free workplace. So our intent and policy is to really have a very narrow policy for students who need it in order to effectively learn. But at this point, I wasn't comfortable recommending that staff are able to use it and possess it for themselves because it's a highly unregulated industry. And so just to give you an example, when I was talking with one of the managers of the wellness stores, he was saying that he recommends that people who have a CDL license to drive a school bus, that they not use any CBD oil because they can't guarantee that you wouldn't test positive on a drug test. So because it's highly unregulated, I wasn't comfortable with staff using and possessing it at this time until we know more. But it's the smallest risk possible in order to let students try to use it in order to help them learn effectively. It was our intent behind the policy.
So is it possible for an employee to get a letter from a doctor that the product they're using is THC free?
They can, I don't know if a doctor would say that or not, but under the statute, in order for anyone to possess it, you have to have a letter from your physician saying you're able to possess it. So what this policy would do is staff would not be able to possess it on school grounds or at school-related functions.
Is there any way possible you see that we could allow it with some sort of doctor approval?
It is according to DPI, it is a local school board decision. What DPI says is school staff are not allowed to administer it because doctors can't prescribe it. So school staff are not allowed to administer it, but DPI is saying it's a local decision whether or not we want to have it on school property and let students self-administer it. But DPI is not making a recommendation on school staff. So what our thinking was in policy is because we have parents requesting it for their students, that we would have parents use it as a tool narrowly to help students learn more effectively, but not open that door for staff until we just know more in terms of the research and the medical community and the state laws around it.
Barb, it's a big issue in the area where I practice too, and there's no certainty to it. And like Gina said, that if we've got anybody taking any type of test, we're just saying don't take it because you're going to test positive on a screen potentially, and then we don't have any flexibility on it. And I can see that I hadn't thought about the Title I implications, but
I
that's
guess
pretty significant.
I would say in that case, I think it's important that we kind of stay on top of what our options are for this, to not be restricting staff unnecessarily in the future. If more certainty develops and there's a way for us to have some assurance that the drugs they're using, the version that they're using is appropriate.
Any other questions? Okay, from a process standpoint, if we're going to consider the editing changes that I put forth with the one change that we made tonight, we would need a motion and then a motion to amend the motion from policy and a second on that.
Can I do that as chair since we read it, or somebody else have to do the amendment?
You can do that.
I'll move to approve policy 558 medication with amendments.
There would be, we can do it that way too. There would need to be a second to that motion, and then the amendment would be, the amendments referred to by the motion would be those submitted by me, in addition within the 1, 2, 3, 4th bullet point after the school office or other locations consistent with where the prescription medicines are stored.
So we have to approve amendments first, then we approve.
We can do it your way. We can do the motion from you to approve the policy changes recommended by policy with the changes suggested at the meeting, and then we'll need a second to that motion.
So
we have
moved.
So moved, and I'll work with you to get it. Okay. Is there a second to that motion? Second. Okay. Any further discussion? Everybody clear on what we're voting on? Okay, take the roll, Katie.
Ms. Flanagan.
Yes.
Ms. Oderico.
Yes.
Ms. Feeney.
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz.
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun.
Yes.
Mr. Zach.
Yes, the policy passes. Barb, we're going to stay on top of kind of the development of CDB law. I think you're going to see that because we're not the only ones asking for it. It's pretty much a state issue trying to figure out where that line's going to be in the workplace.
My main concern is that some people are finding it helpful for pain relief in lieu of using other stronger drugs. So I think it's really important
Yep.
that we
Yep.
pay a lot of attention to
Yeah,
this.
it's just that uncertainty right now that potentially impacts some of our status that causes us the problem. Good. That takes us to discussion items, committee reports, policy. We just had work from you.
We also did discuss graduation requirements, and so we'll be coming to the board in February at one of the meetings in February to discuss that.
Visioning.
We don't have a specific meeting planned at this point, but I will be putting together a meeting in the coming weeks to discuss, among other things, the screen time issue that we talked about, and anything else that anyone would like to kind of put on the board's radar for the coming months. I'd be happy to consider. So folks on the Vision Committee, be looking for an email from me to set that up sometime soon.
Thanks, Courtney. Item F on our agenda, information items, board election, April 2, 2019. Heard a little bit about that tonight, but Brian, this is yours.
This will be fast, so listen carefully. We are all set for the board election. The ballot has been finalized, and we've picked the lots. Incumbent Krista Flanagan and Anna Bijak, who you met earlier tonight, will be on the ballot and are running uncontested. So that completes a long, comprehensive report on the board election. It's Tuesday, April 2nd, 2019.
Who drew the first slot?
Anna is the first on the ballot, and Krista is second. So I'll just keep us moving. WASB convention, this will also be fast. Next week is the WASB Joint Convention. It is the 98th State Education Conference. I know a number of you are going to be there, and now Tim is armed for his Wednesday morning responsibility, and I believe Steve's going to make a few comments as well during checkout. So I will stop with that. If you need any materials, you can get them from Katie. Remember, for those of you that, I guess, all of you have been there before. You pick up your registration materials on site, so we don't have anything outside of a program or an agenda that's posted on the WASB website. But the first thing is to check in and pick up your registration materials, and then 2.5 days worth of meetings and workshops. So we hope you enjoy it. And I'll keep going to item number 3, Superintendent's Report. Just a couple of items. Last Saturday, we had the Health and Wellness Expo. That was sponsored by Community Education, and this morning I had an opportunity to speak with Deb Bossingham, and she said as far as first-time events go, we had a good turnout, close to 100 individuals, and she felt the event went very well, and we had a number of community business partners that were at the event. As you've already heard, high school exams Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week. So we wish our high school students well with that exam, with their exams that are coming up. Third item, we almost are set on our six of our school leadership teams reporting to the board and each other at 2 meetings. If you haven't RSVP'd to Katie, please do so this week. We're trying to pin that down. And the dates we're looking at, one you will always remember, Monday, April 15th, and then Monday, April 19th. And you likely recall this is an outgrowth of the work that we started last year with Dr. Rickabaw's book on the 5 levers of learning. So if you haven't responded, please get to Katie by the end of the week so we can firm those up. I've given those dates to the principals, and I know they have shared with their school leadership team as well. Item number 4, we began the 2019-2020 staffing process, which is something I know all of us are interested in terms of planning for next year's staffing. We are targeting being ready with a March 11th report to the board. Typically, just to remind all of us, when we do staffing, we usually do it over 2 meetings. We provide you with a first draft report. We'll do that in March. A lot of times we've provided that in April. Steve asked me for us to administratively bring it earlier. We don't expect you to approve it on March 11th, but if you felt so inclined, that would be terrific. Otherwise, we'll come back with any questions that you have and respond to those questions for the first meeting in April. This week, I'm guessing a couple of you might be participating in the capstone interviews at Oregon High School. I'm going to be here 2 mornings on Thursday and Friday, and if you haven't had the opportunity to do that in the past, it is a great experience for you. And then one thing, I'm not trying to put a curse on this, but I've heard we might have a possible weather event tomorrow morning with freezing rain. So we will be watching everything super close to make sure that everything is set for a safe and orderly transition to school. And of course, when it involves freezing rain, it's always complicated, but we will be up early in the morning. And I spoke with Mark already, and he has touched bases with some bus contractors to make sure that we have a good sense of how the roads are. So if in your part of the district it's just rain, and in another part of the district it's freezing rain, we could have potentially a 2-hour delay, which we try not to do that often. I don't think we'd have a close. It's more likely to be a 2-hour delay if we have freezing rain. So maybe that's just a little bit of a curse that I put on the weather right now. Any questions, board members? I'm happy to respond to them.
Okay, that takes us to closing future agenda. A couple things on that. Brian mentioned the staffing and bringing that forward at an earlier date. Troy, Tim, and I have comprised the staffing task force, and we've been meeting with Andy and Gina and Leslie and Brian to kind of get a snapshot of the staffing in the district, and we're going to be working on getting information to the remainder of the board members to synthesize the information that we've got. But it's been terrific meetings, so look forward to getting that information from our task force on that. Tomorrow we have a meeting at 6:30 at the district office. We've got 4 board members, I think, going to be there. We need to confirm that. You're going to be there. You're not. Okay, so we've got 4. The purpose of that, we're going to meet with Michelle Weiberg of PMA. The market factors are such that we're looking to go out at a little bit earlier time than we had contemplated. So we need to give her some instruction. And then we're looking at the following Tuesday, the 22nd, to have a board meeting to confirm the sale. So I need you guys to kind of take a look at. We'll work on that. We'll need 4 because I think they're planning on the sale the 22nd in the mornings. Okay. Would you be there the 22nd? I would be there. Okay. Troy? Okay. Yeah. We'll work on this. Okay. Pardon? Yeah. Yeah. So the other thing is we do have a policy on remote participation. So we may be utilizing that, folks. Good thing we adopted that policy, right? Because it would be helpful to be able to finalize the sale because the market stuff is, we're going to try to grab good conditions and get out ahead of the curve. Okay. No expulsion hearing Wednesday night, or if you didn't see, so we're free this Wednesday. We're free. Okay, so no Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week. It's Monday and Tuesday. And then next Tuesday we're going to try to work that, and we'll try to do that remotely. So we'll talk about that. We'll send out a doodle on that. And then the WASB convention is next week, and Katie's posted that there'll be a quorum of the board over there, as we normally do. It's a terrific conference. We gather with almost all the school boards across the state and their administrators and business managers and other folks, and it's really educational. It gets us, keeps us in the game in terms of knowledge base. So, and the keynotes look really good this year too. So, look forward to seeing everyone there. Check with Katie on the logistic arrangements in terms of hotels and that stuff. That's all I had for the agenda. Brian and I will be working on the agenda for the 28th. I'm not sure if we have a lot, but we'll see.
I don't think it's super long.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on agendas? If you have anything, just let us know. Other than that, we'll move to checkout. Courtney, anything? Troy? No. Barb? Tim? Krista? I don't have anything either, so we'll take about 5 minutes. We're going to move over to the side room for our closed session. We'll not be returning to open session. Our audience can go home early and beat the ice storm and maybe watch the Badger game. Thanks, everyone.